Welcome to our deep dive on a topic that I'm sure hits home for you. As a woman in middle management, women in leadership, we're going to explore the amazing progress that women have made, figure out what's working so well, and examine the biases that are still hanging around that we all need to be aware of. And ultimately, we want to give you some really solid insights into how you can help other women rise while also using sponsorship to reach your own full potential.
Such a fascinating area right now with a lot to celebrate, but also a lot of work still to do.
Yeah, exactly. And to help guide us through this deep dive, we've got an amazing mix of sources. First up, we'll be taking inspiration from Venus Williams, who's not just a tennis superstar, but also a strong advocate for women in business.
Her interviews give such incredible insights into equal pay, entrepreneurship, and creating financial opportunities for women.
Totally. Then, we're going to shift gears a little bit and dig into the data with leanin.org's 2019 Women in the Workplace report. They've got all the hard numbers on women's representation across corporate America, and they really highlight what they call the broken rung phenomenon.
That broken rung concept is so important for us to understand. It's all about that initial step up to management, where women are often left behind.
Right. And we're also going global with the Australian government's Working for Women report. This one really zooms in on women's presence in decision-making roles across every sector, not just business.
The thing that really struck me about this report is the focus on the quality of that representation. It's not just about numbers, it's about women truly having a voice in shaping policies and decisions.
Exactly. And to round things out, we'll be looking at the gender pay gap, something that's always relevant. And we'll be using a Forbes article to analyze the factors at play, including those less obvious but still very powerful
Yeah.
barriers, glass ceilings, and sticky floors.
It's such a multi-layered issue with both historical and modern roots, and it really shows how important it is to stay aware and proactive.
So let's jump right in with Venus Williams. One thing that really stood out to me in her interviews was her long fight for equal prize money in tennis. She spoke out for years, dealing with pushback and even criticism, but she didn't give up. And ultimately, her efforts led to Wimbledon awarding equal prize money for the first time in 2007, the same year she won.
What's so amazing about her story is that it's not just the outcome, it's how strategically Venus approached it. She wasn't just complaining, she was presenting solid arguments, rallying support from the public, and just persisting even when it was really tough.
It's a powerful reminder that change very rarely happens overnight, right? It often takes sustained effort, really strategic thinking, and a willingness to stand up and challenge the status quo. I mean, if Venus Williams could face down the entire tennis establishment, what can we achieve in our own companies? What is universe worth of speaking out about?
I think that's such a powerful question for all of us who are in leadership positions. We have a responsibility not just to advocate for ourselves, but to create a culture where other women feel empowered to speak up to.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the leanin.org report, which highlights a big obstacle a lot of women face early on in their careers, the broken rung.
And this isn't just about feeling stuck, it's a statistical reality. For every 100 men who are promoted and hired to manager, only 72 women are. And that gap, right at the entry level, ends up creating a ripple effect that impacts women's representation at every level of leadership.
So then how do we fix this broken rung?
Yeah.
It's not enough to just acknowledge it exists, right? We need to actually do something about it. As middle managers, what are some concrete things that we can do within our own teams to make a difference?
Well, this is where we move from awareness to action. Are we making sure that women have equal access to opportunities for growth and development? Are we advocating for them in performance reviews and when it's time for promotions? Are we actually creating an environment where their contributions are truly valued and their voices are heard?
Such crucial questions to be asking. It's all about being intentional with our actions, right?
Yeah.
And creating a space where women can really thrive and advance.
And it's about examining our own biases and assumptions. Are we, even without realizing it, favoring men for specific roles or projects? Are we overlooking women's qualifications or dismissing their ideas? These little subtle biases can have a huge impact even if we don't realize we're contributing to them.
It's definitely a constant process of looking inward and making sure that we're truly creating a level playing field.
Yeah, it really is about being mindful of those unconscious biases we all have, but we also can't forget about the systemic barriers that exist too. Even when people have good intentions, those barriers can hold women back.
That's true. Individual action is important, but it really has to go hand in hand with bigger organizational changes.
Yeah.
And the leanin.org report actually offers some really solid steps that companies can take to tackle that broken rung problem we talked about.
One of the most effective strategies they highlight is setting really clear and measurable goals for getting more women into those first level management positions.
Hmm.
It's not enough to just talk about diversity. You have to make it a target, something measurable that holds the company accountable.
I really like that idea of setting targets. It creates a sense of urgency, right? And shows that this is a real priority. But how do you actually make sure those targets are met? What are some of the things companies can do in a practical sense?
Well, the report strongly suggests requiring diverse candidate pools for hiring and promotions. So it means making a real effort to consider a range of candidates for every position that opens up, not just going with the first qualified person that comes along.
It's about broadening your search, right?
Yeah.
Making sure you're not overlooking talent just because they don't fit some preconceived idea of what the role should look like. But sometimes, even when you have a diverse group of candidates, biases can still sneak into the hiring process.
Exactly. And that's why the report puts such a big emphasis on training. Training for everyone who's involved in hiring and performance reviews. We all have unconscious biases,
Mm.
but being aware of them can help us make decisions that are more fair.
Awareness is definitely key, and that kind of training can really change the game. What else does the report recommend?
Another crucial step is setting up clear evaluation criteria. So having really objective and measurable standards for how you assess candidates, which helps to create a level playing field and ensures that everyone is being judged fairly, you're taking the subjectivity out of the equation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
If you have clear criteria, it's harder for biases to influence the decisions being made. It also makes it easier to explain those decisions and be sure that they're based on merit.
Absolutely. Transparency is so important. And one last point from the report, they really emphasize the importance of putting more women into roles that are in line for management. So giving them opportunities for leadership training, sponsorship, and high-profile assignments that can help them build the skills and experience they need to succeed.
It's about setting women up to succeed, not just expecting them to figure it all out on their own. But even with all those efforts within companies which are obviously essential, it's not the whole picture.
Right. If we kind of zoom out a bit and consider the Australian government's Working for Women report, it reminds us that leadership isn't just limited to the corporate world. It's about having a voice and making a real impact across all parts of society.
And that report has a really interesting take on it. It's not just about getting more women into leadership positions. It's about making sure they have a real and meaningful presence in decision-making processes everywhere.
One of the key things they point out is that you can't have true equality without women from diverse backgrounds truly participating in making decisions. It's not enough to just have women present. We need women from all different walks of life with their unique perspectives and experiences to really create change.
That diversity of thought is so essential. It leads to more creative solutions, more equitable policies, and a much richer understanding of the issues we're facing.
For sure. And the report also highlighted something that I found really powerful. When women aren't part of the decision-making process, policies and systems often don't actually meet their needs. It's about having a place at the table when those decisions are being made that directly affect your life.
That's such a crucial point. It's not just about fairness. It's about effectiveness. You can't create a system that works for everyone if you don't have everyone's input. And that's true for anything from government policies to company strategies to community initiatives.
You got it. And the report also emphasized the need for more women in leadership roles to help change attitudes and stereotypes about gender. It's about shifting the narrative, showing the world that women are just as capable and qualified as men to lead.
That visibility is so important. It's about breaking down those outdated assumptions and showing young girls and women that they can achieve anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we're celebrating all the progress that's been made, it's also really important to acknowledge that we still have quite a ways to go, especially when we're talking about closing the gender pay gap.
Yeah.
And that Forbes article we have really digs into the complexities of this ongoing issue.
It's honestly frustrating that this is still a battle we're fighting in 2025.
Mhm.
But the article does a good job of explaining the different things that contribute to the pay gap. It's not always as simple as outright discrimination. It's often more about these subtle biases and systemic issues that are harder to see.
For example, women are often penalized for putting family responsibilities first. They might be more likely to look for flexible work arrangements or part-time jobs to handle childcare or taking care of elderly family members. And those choices can lead to lower salaries and fewer opportunities to move up.
It's that classic dilemma.
Yeah.
How do you balance the needs of your work and your family without having to sacrifice your career ambitions?
And even when women do prioritize their careers, they often run into biases that limit how much they can earn. Employers might make assumptions about their commitment or their future plans just based on their gender, which can mean lower starting salaries and fewer promotions.
It's those little biases that are so hard to identify but end up having a huge impact over time.
For sure. The article also talked about the impact of career disruptions, like
Yeah.
taking time off to have kids, which can make it tougher for women to gain experience and move up at the same pace as men.
It's like you're always trying to catch up.
Yeah,
And those breaks in your career can really hurt your earning potential over the long term.
absolutely. And then there's the whole issue of conscious and unconscious bias when it comes to negotiating salaries. Women might be less likely to really push for higher salaries, and even when they do, they might face pushback or be seen in a negative light.
It's a no-win situation, damn if you do and damned if you don't.
The article also made another interesting point. Jobs in industries dominated by women tend to pay less than those dominated by men, which makes you think about how we value certain kinds of work and the societal norms that contribute to these pay gaps.
Yeah, it's a good point. It reminds us that the fight for equal pay isn't just about individuals negotiating better. It's about changing the system itself and challenging those really deep-rooted societal expectations.
Right. And we can't forget about all the invisible labor that women often take on, all that unpaid work at home, like taking care of the kids and housework. That stuff can be so exhausting and time-consuming, and it leaves women with less energy and time to focus on their careers, which can definitely impact how much they earn.
It's like having a whole second job, but one that doesn't come with any pay or recognition.
The Forbes article also talked about how the coronavirus pandemic affected the gender pay gap. At first, it looked like the gap was getting smaller, but it turned out that was mostly because a much larger percentage of low-wage women lost their jobs during the pandemic.
So it wasn't real progress. It was just a reflection of the tough economic times that women were hit harder by.
Exactly. And now, as those women are starting to go back to work, they're facing a new challenge of having gaps in their employment history, which can make it even harder to find jobs and get fair salaries.
It's a setback that could have lasting effects on women's financial security.
Yeah, it's a real concern. But despite all these challenges, the article does offer some hope. It suggests a few strategies for tackling the gender pay gap.
Let's talk about solutions. What are some of the most impactful things that companies can do to make a difference?
One of the best strategies is to be more open about pay. This could mean encouraging employees to talk to each other about their salaries, which can help women see where those pay differences exist and advocate for themselves more effectively.
That's so important. We need to stop treating money like it's a taboo subject. Talking about it isn't rude. It's empowering.
Right. Another strategy is for companies to stop asking about salary history during the hiring process. This helps to level the playing field and prevents past pay inequalities from following women into their new jobs.
It's about focusing on the value that you bring to the table, not what you were paid at some other company.
The article also pointed out how important it is to have regular internal reviews of compensation to identify and address any pay discrepancies between male and female employees. This shows a commitment to fairness and can help catch those subtle biases that lead to pay gaps.
It's about being proactive and holding companies accountable for creating pay systems that are truly equitable.
Exactly. And some experts even suggest getting rid of salary negotiations altogether, replacing them with transparent salary ranges or set salaries based on experience and qualifications. This takes out that subjective element of negotiation, which can often put women at a disadvantage.
That's a bold idea, but it could be a game changer when it comes to achieving real pay equity.
And one last thought from the article. They highlighted the importance of guaranteeing things like paid time off, paid sick leave, and paid family and medical leave.
Those benefits can help to minimize those career disruptions that often impact women more, and it allows them to maintain their earning potential and keep their career moving forward.
It's about creating a system that supports working families and recognizes the value of caregiving.
So we've talked a lot about systemic issues and policy changes, but let's bring it back to our listener. For you as a woman in middle management, what can you do to navigate these challenges and make a positive impact?
This is where it gets really exciting. Remember what Venus Williams said about knowing your worth. That applies to every single part of your career, from salary negotiations to finding mentors and sponsors.
It's about believing in yourself, knowing what you bring to the table, and not being afraid to ask for what you deserve.
And don't underestimate how powerful networking and building relationships can be. Surround yourself with people who support your goals, who can give you advice and guidance, and who can connect you with opportunities.
Yeah, those connections can be invaluable, especially when it comes to finding sponsors who can really help you succeed. It's true. Those connections can make such a big difference. And while we're on the topic of sponsorship, let's dig into how to actually find and build those relationships that can really boost our careers.
Sponsorship can be a total game changer for women in leadership. Both Venus and Serena Williams talked about it, and the Leanin.org report also emphasizes how much having a sponsor can accelerate your career and open doors you might not have even known existed.
It sounds incredible,
Yeah.
but I think for a lot of women, the whole idea of finding and asking for a sponsor could be really intimidating. Where you even start?
I get that. It can feel a bit overwhelming. But let's break it down into smaller steps. First, think about what you're really looking for in a sponsor. It's not just about someone with a fancy title or a huge network.
Right. It's about someone who truly believes in you and your potential. Someone who gets your goals and is willing to actually use their influence to help you out.
Exactly. So look for people in your company who are respected leaders, who have a track record of supporting others, and who have connections that align with what you want to achieve.
So it's about finding those people you really admire, who inspire you, and who you can see yourself learning from and having as an advocate.
Yeah. Once you've identified some potential sponsors, it's time to start building those relationships. And remember, sponsorship really grows out of a genuine connection. It's not about going straight to asking for favors.
It's about showing them your value, building trust, and letting them see your skills and your potential. So how do you actually go about building those relationships?
Look for opportunities to interact with those potential sponsors in ways that are meaningful. Volunteer for projects they're involved with, go to industry events where you know they'll be, or even just engage in thoughtful conversations with them when you have the chance.
Be proactive about getting their advice, asking for feedback, and showing that you're serious about learning and growing. Let them see that you're invested in your development and that you value their input.
And as you build those relationships, don't be afraid to be open about your career goals and where you want to go. Let those potential sponsors know what you're working towards and the kind of support you might need. They can't really help you if they don't know where you're headed.
It's all about having those honest conversations about your ambitions. But it's also important to remember that sponsorship is a two-way street.
Absolutely. Be ready to offer your support in return, whether that's by sharing your own knowledge, giving them a fresh perspective, or just being a reliable and trustworthy colleague. Sponsorship is a mutually beneficial relationship. It's built on respect, shared goals, and a real desire to see each other succeed.
It's not just about what they can do for you. It's about how you can contribute to their success too.
Now, I know that taking that leap and actually asking for sponsorship can be really scary. It can almost feel like you're asking for a favor, which can be uncomfortable.
It can be hard to put yourself out there like that, but I think if you look at it as a mutually beneficial partnership, it can feel a little less daunting.
And remember, the worst that can happen is they say no. And even if they do, you've still gained some valuable experience in building relationships and advocating for yourself. You've shown them that you're willing to take initiative and that you have courage. And those things won't go unnoticed.
And who knows, maybe that no will turn into a yes later on as you keep building that relationship and showing them what you can do.
Right. It's all part of the process. And speaking of process, I want to emphasize that sponsorship takes time. It's a long-term investment for both you and your sponsor. It takes time to build that trust, to prove yourself, and for your sponsor to really understand your potential and how to best support you.
So don't get discouraged if things don't happen overnight. It's about nurturing those relationships and letting them grow naturally.
As we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave you with one final empowering thought. We've seen some amazing progress in women's leadership, but we're not done yet. The broken rung, glass ceilings, and sticky floors are all reminders that biases and systemic barriers are still very much a reality.
It can be easy to feel defeated, but we can't forget that we don't have to accept the way things are. Each of us has the power to create change, to fight back against those biases, and to build a future where things are more fair.
So whether you're actively looking for a sponsor, mentoring other women, pushing for policy changes, or simply speaking out against injustice, your actions matter. They can have a ripple effect and inspire others to create a world where women can thrive.
I agree. So to our listener, I want to say this. Believe in yourself, believe in your voice, and believe in the power of women supporting each other.
The future of women's leadership is in our hands, and together we can build a world where every woman has the chance to achieve her full potential.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into women's leadership. We hope you found it insightful and that you feel inspired to make a difference. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the topics that matter most to you.